The train smelled like bleach in winter. Cold air gusted through the doors as they opened at Chicago Union Station. I stepped in, dragging my worn suitcase, my name tag from the university still attached to the side pocket. My family stood near the rear of the car, scattered like they didn't belong together. Gavin nodded at me without standing. Ruth gave a stiff half-smile, her oversized sunglasses still on though we were indoors. Lydia looked up from her phone with brief interest before going back to it. Thomas offered a half-hearted hey, like I was someone's neighbor, not his sister. Elaine, my mother, gripped my hand for a second. Her eyes fluttered to Ruth and then back to me, but she said nothing. "This one's yours," Ruth said sharply, pointing to a seat beside a stranger a few rows away from the family cluster. "Balance," she added with a shrug, as if assigning weight to a suitcase. I didn't argue. I knew better. They always smiled with their mouths, never with their eyes. The last time they hugged me, I had a fever and a cast. That was 8 years ago. I sat. The man beside me didn't look up. He had gray along his temples, a close-cropped beard, and a briefcase that looked like it had seen a few too many secured rooms. His coat was military issue. I recognized it. My father had the same type when he retired from the Department of Defense. The train hissed to life. I looked down the aisle. My family, my own blood, leaned in toward one another, voices low. Gavin laughed. Ruth adjusted her sunglasses. Then the man next to me leaned in slightly, just enough for his words to brush my ear. "Act sick and leave now." I froze. "Excuse me?" I turned toward him, but his eyes stayed forward, unreadable. "You've got 10 seconds before the first mile marker," he said. His tone didn't change. No panic. Just fact. I scanned his face. Something about the stillness in his posture, the calm certainty, it chilled me more than the whisper itself. I looked down at his briefcase again. A faded sticker, half torn, but I made it out, Homeland Security. Why me? I thought. Why now? I glanced toward my family. Gavin scrolling, Ruth whispering to Lydia. They weren't watching. Or maybe they were. Maybe this was all part of something that started before I got on the train. My heart pounded against my ribs like it wanted out. I remembered Ruth's voice from 2 nights ago, quiet and cold, try not to ruin the reunion this time. 10 seconds. I stood, grabbing my stomach. "Ma'am?" The man beside me didn't move. I stumbled forward, bumping into an older woman holding a book. "Oh," she gasped. "Are you all right?" someone behind me called out. My bag slipped, unzipped deliberately. Papers fluttered out, prescriptions, test results, doctor's notes. They weren't real. Not all of them. But they looked the part. I doubled over. "She's fainting," a man shouted. Ruth stood but didn't move toward me. My father stayed seated. Gavin grinned. It was brief, but I saw it. I dropped. Not entirely faked. My hands shook. My breath hitched. But I leaned into it, collapsing halfway to the aisle. The conductor rushed in, followed by a crew member. Caleb, the stranger, stood but backed away. He didn't help. That was smart. A woman held a water bottle to my lips. "Stay with us," she said. I whispered, mostly to myself, "This is my only exit." The train hadn't gone far. They pulled me toward the front, out into the cold again. A stretcher waited. I was lifted, wheeled, wrapped in a blanket. I could hear Ruth arguing in the background. My mother didn't follow. She never does. From the stretcher, I looked back into the window. Ruth mouthed something. You always ruin everything. Gavin was laughing. Thomas just watched. But Lydia, my sister, her eyes were wet. I spotted him again. Caleb. Standing where I left him. He held up one finger. A signal. Remember, I interpreted silently. Remember why. I lay back. The train doors sealed with a mechanical hush. I whispered, I wasn't the sick one. The paramedics chatted casually. One asked for my ID. I gave a fake name. She didn't question it. I exhaled. Not fear, clarity. They thought I was gone. Removed. A liability solved. But that whisper wasn't a warning. It was a lifeline. Outside, the sky darkened. I was free. And they had no idea. As the paramedics adjusted the blanket around me, I leaned slightly toward the woman nearest. They think I'm out of the game, I said, voice soft. Good. The news hit social media within minutes. A TikTok account posted, woman collapses minutes after train departs Chicago. My fall, staged, captured, viral. The first piece of evidence. The first chess move. I knew I wouldn't be going home. Not the same home. And that was exactly the point. Have you ever realized, too late, that your family had other plans for you? Would you have trusted the whisper or stayed seated in silence? Fog curled along the street gutters as I stepped out of the rideshare 3 blocks from the house. Ridgewood looked the same, symmetrical lawns, tired shutters, trash bins neatly aligned. But it didn't feel the same. Not to me. I had grown up here. I knew every crack in the sidewalk, every tree whose roots buckled the pavement. But this morning, it all felt synthetic. Too neat. Too curated. I pulled my hoodie down low and adjusted the cap tighter over my hair. A jogger passed by without a glance. Good. I wanted to be invisible. I crossed through the alley, avoiding the street cameras I knew my father had installed after the neighborhood break-ins 3 years ago. Still remembered the code for the back gate. 4-6-2-1, my birthday in reverse. The cellar door groaned like a warning. But no alarm blared. No lights flickered on. The house was empty. Inside, the scent of bleach still hung in the air. Clean. Sterile. I moved quickly, every creak of the wooden floor a memory whispering back. The kitchen. The burned countertop Gavin once lied about. The stairs where Lydia broke her wrist. The living room where no one clapped at my college acceptance. Upstairs, the attic door was locked. Of course it was. Gavin used to use a pattern code for everything back in high school. My birthday, backward. I punched it in. Click. The attic was colder than I expected. And cleaner. No dust, no cobwebs, no family photos. Just boxes, identical, labeled in my mother's tight script. Legal/medical. My fingers trembled as I opened the first one. A folder lay on top. Inside, a durable power of attorney. My name. My signature. But I had never seen this before. The medical proxy listed? Ruth. I flipped to the next page. Psychiatric evaluations. Words like unstable, hallucinations, early intervention recommended. The doctor's name was familiar. Dr. Hansen. He treated me for migraines in high school. I kept going. A life insurance policy, massive. Beneficiary, Ruth. Dated 2 months ago. They weren't just setting me up. They were getting ready to cash out. I grabbed my phone, scanning one of the QR codes embedded in the insurance form. It pulled up a medical server login, encrypted. But the system recognized my facial ID. I was in. More files. More lies. Every document bore my signature. I studied the curves, the loops. It looked like mine. But it wasn't. Not really. Not willingly. I whispered, they're not just planning to control me. They're planning to erase me. My phone vibrated. Dad. I let it ring twice before answering. Marin, his voice was smooth, rehearsed. We're worried about you. Are you okay? I didn't respond. In the background, I heard Gavin. Tell her to come home. She's probably just spiraling. Then Ruth's voice, muffled, sharp. Don't push. She'll crawl back. She always does. I ended the call. My hand shook as I set the phone on the counter. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. Just air. Cold, quiet air. I walked out back to the swing set. The chains groaned under my weight. I pushed with my feet, letting myself sway. The light across the yard flicked on. Mildred Harris stepped onto her porch in a robe and slippers, her gray hair pinned neatly. I saw the lights, she said. Thought it might be you. She stepped closer, arms folded. I've been watching the house since they started clearing it out, she added. Some men came a few weeks ago. Boxes. Nighttime. I looked up at her, heart still pounding. Do you still have your front yard camera? Mildred blinked, then nodded. It backs up to the cloud. You want the footage? I stood slowly. Yes. Please. That spark, I hadn't felt it in years. It wasn't hope. It was fire. She shuffled back inside, and I followed. The files downloaded to my phone while she made tea. Time-stamped. Clear. Boxes labeled personal effects and archive A. Men in unmarked jackets. One of them looked like someone from Gavin's investment firm. I thanked her, hugged her briefly, and left. At the motel, I used a VPN to re-access the medical portal. A new folder had appeared. I hadn't seen it earlier. It required facial recognition again. I held my phone steady. It blinked green. Inside, more psychiatric records. But these were recent. Created just 2 weeks ago. Diagnosis, delusional ideation. Onset likely postpartum. My breath caught. Postpartum? I never had a child. I stared at the screen. They weren't just rewriting my past. They were designing a future that never existed. What would you do if your own family rewrote your story while you were still alive? Ever been told you were imagining things, only to find out the nightmare was real? The envelope was thick, crisp, and smelled faintly of toner. I held it in my hands outside the Madison County Courthouse, ignoring the October wind slipping through my coat. Emergency guardianship hearing, it read, bold, centered, no room for confusion. I'd been in Chicago for months. They knew my address. And yet it had found its way to a P.O. box I hadn't touched since college. Inside, the building was a theater of polished marble and hushed voices. Families clustered together, some grieving, some exhausted, some just confused. I walked through it like a ghost. All my life I was the quiet one until quiet meant powerless. The clerk didn't blink as she handed me the clipboard. "Sign here," she said. My name printed under the header, "Subject lacks capacity to manage finances and health." I spotted Gavin first. His suit was darker than his eyes, and just as cold. He didn't look at me. Ruth was behind him, legs crossed, fingers motionless in her lap. Her eyes didn't blink. Elaine, my mother, sat in the back. She saw me and looked away. A single tear welled in her eye but never fell. I gripped the folder under my arm like a weapon. I had only what I could prove. They dimmed the courtroom lights. A projector flickered on. A digital record appeared, my name, my birth date, a scanned report. 6 months ago, I had voluntarily admitted myself to an inpatient psychiatric facility for suicidal ideation and major depressive disorder. I stood. That's false. I've never been to that facility. The judge raised an eyebrow but didn't respond. Ruth's voice slid in like a scalpel. Your Honor, our family has followed every recommended protocol. Marin refused help. This was necessary. I stared at the screen. Not because of what it showed, but because I remembered exactly where I was 6 months ago, wearing a hoodie, alone in my apartment, transferring code for an overseas account, whispering backup plans into the silence. That same night, my browser pinged unauthorized access. I remembered. They were watching even then. I shifted. I have audio evidence, I said carefully. A neighbor recorded men removing documents from my home weeks before the collapse. The judge leaned forward. Is that submitted into evidence? No, I answered. Not yet. Then for now, he said, it's hearsay. He called a recess. I didn't move. Then my phone vibrated. I pulled it from my coat. One alert, flashing. Account accessed from Wisconsin. I looked up. Security had entered the courtroom. People were murmuring. Ruth leaned toward Gavin. He only nodded. I met his gaze. He didn't flinch. Outside the courthouse, reporters had assembled like flies. One leaned forward with a mic. Marin O'Connell, is it true you falsified psychiatric records to gain control of your trust? I kept walking. Later, I listened to my voicemail. You need to call me. Channel 12's running something on you. I walked back into the courthouse. The lobby TV was tuned to a local feed. My face filled the screen, blurry video of me collapsing on the train platform. The voiceover was merciless, mental instability suspected. Financial records under review. The footage cut, looping my fall, pausing on my dazed expression. I stood and watched myself fall again and again. Up on the second floor, Gavin stood at the balcony. Watching. Unmoving. I turned to Elaine. Why haven't you spoken? She opened her mouth, then shut it again. I thought about Mildred's voice. About Ruth's hand on the proxy papers. About my own silence. I whispered, power doesn't just take. It erases. I walked the halls like a woman grieving a funeral no one had announced. In the corridor behind courtroom D, someone sat alone on a bench. Caleb Myers. He stood as I approached and held out a small USB drive. This is what they decided you couldn't have. I didn't ask. I took it. I wasn't invisible, I murmured. I was overwritten. He nodded once. Time-stamped security footage. Shows your father's secretary removing files before your collapse. I slipped it into my bag. Time to prove my existence. Down the hall, a guard's phone lit up. I saw it from the corner of my eye. He wasn't taking photos, he was live streaming. Eyes turned. And I turned with them. I stepped through the courtroom doors again. Not to join them. To oppose them. Would you stand silent while your identity is rewritten without you? Or would you pick up the pen and start typing your own truth? The house looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I was finally seeing it without the illusion of safety. The moonlight cut across the siding, and every window was a blind eye. I slipped through the side gate, key in my pocket, the same one I'd used when I was 16 and thought secrets could be kept between walls. Inside, it smelled of polish and disinfectant, too clean to be lived in. The living room was stripped bare except for the piano. My mother's hands once played lullabies there, now it sat mute and gleaming like a monument to someone else's peace. I moved through each room softly, breathing in silence that didn't belong to me anymore. Every creak echoed history. But tonight, the history was against me. My father's study door was ajar. I stepped inside. The shelves were neat, color-coded, Ruth's doing. The framed photo of us on the mantel was gone. In its place, a locked drawer, an unplugged phone, and an empty whiskey glass. Our name means trust, my father used to say. And yet here I was, sneaking through rooms built on betrayal. I crouched near the floor vent, pressed a small recording device beneath a stack of law journals on Gavin's old desk. I whispered, time to listen, rather than be listened to. The faint click of the power light made my stomach tighten. I turned on the small screen, syncing the feed. Static. Then, a quiet hum of voices from upstairs. On the TV monitor, two women appeared, my mother Elaine, shoulders slumped, and Ruth, crisp as ever. Elaine's voice shook. 3 months in the facility will clear it. The house, everything, goes to Gavin's trust. Ruth's tone was surgical. Marin'll sign eventually. She always does. My hand hovered over the pause button. I pressed record instead. They weren't planning to protect my mother. They were planning to redirect her trust. My throat tightened. For years I thought Ruth was the mastermind. But now I heard my mother's voice, quiet, complicit. That hurt more than the lies. Then, footsteps. I froze. Lydia's reflection flickered in the glass of the hallway picture frame. She stood at the edge of the room, her voice barely a whisper. Stop this now, or you'll regret it. Her shadow lingered. Then vanished. The device nearly slipped from my fingers. I caught it, breath trembling. My pulse raced. Every instinct screamed to run. But I stayed. The file saved. My proof. They set the trap, I whispered. Now I set the bait. The floor light blinked red. Motion sensors. Suddenly, the overhead lights blazed on. The alarm began to shriek, a sound so sharp it splintered through my bones. I bolted up the stairs, 2 steps at a time. The front hall glowed with blue light from the security system. At the top of the stairs stood Gavin. Calm. Phone glowing in his hand like a badge of power. Nice try, he said softly. Now come downstairs and talk like a family. I stopped halfway up. The space between us was years of silence and something darker. You used my name to erase me. My voice cracked, but I held his gaze. Gavin's face didn't change. You made it easy. I turned and ran toward the garage. My breath came sharp, ragged. The heavy scent of oil filled the air. I ducked behind the sedan, crouching low as I saw Ruth at the front door locking it, barking orders into her phone. They thought I'd run, I whispered. I didn't. Because now I know where their walls are thin. I moved quickly to the side door, unlocking it with trembling fingers. The night air rushed in, cold and clean. And then, flash. A burst of light from the yard. I looked toward the fence. Across the street, Mildred's house glowed faintly. Her lawn camera, the one she'd given me footage from, was blinking red. It wasn't just recording. It was transmitting. I stepped into the open, breath visible in the cold. They wanted me to disappear. But tonight, the world would see me standing. Have you ever had the feeling you're being watched in your own home and realize the watcher was once your ally? Would you keep running or turn the lights on and let them see you standing? The morning sunlight looked different through the courthouse windows. It glowed against the polished marble but failed to warm the room. I walked into the gallery of Madison County Court, composed in my navy blazer, notebook in hand. Cameras pointed like fingers. Reporters hovered. My family sat in the front row, Gavin, Ruth, Thomas, Elaine, Lydia, each face a mask I once trusted. The prosecutor opened with a sharp declaration. Marin O'Connell is accused of severe financial mismanagement and mental instability. The words landed hard on my chest. I could feel them like blows though I remained still. I listened as Gavin's lawyer recited facts, trusts, transfers, alleged hospitalizations. My stomach knotted. A lifetime of being overlooked flashed through me. Only this time the overlooked position threatened to become permanent. My turn came. I rose slowly. I held the folder from the house in my clutch. I said, respecting a name isn't the same as owning it. I steadied my voice. My family used my name, my trust, my records to lock me out. The air shifted. Then the bomb dropped. A USB handed to the clerk. Caleb's evidence, unedited footage of the night files were taken from the house. Timestamps lining screaming evidence. Gavin's secretary loading boxes. Ruth negotiating the proxy switch. My heart pounded, and yet I was calm. The room broke. The judge paused. Murmurs rose. Gavin's face lost its veneer for a moment. Elaine's tears fell openly. Lydia shrank in her seat. The prosecutor fought back, but the door to truth swung open. The visuals rolled. I stood by my notebook, voice low, my name was borrowed. Then put up for sale. The lawyer for my family tried to recover control, but Harold Denton stood and revealed his recusal. He confessed he'd helped draft the documents, admit the falsification. The tide turned. Outside, cameras snapped. A reporter asked, "Is this justice for you, Ms. O'Connell?" I exhaled. Free is not the same as safe, but it is what I fought for. I watched my family leave the courtroom empty-handed. Have you ever waited for someone to apologize and never got the right words? What did you do instead? The courthouse doors swung open with a sigh, and sunlight spilled over the marble steps like it had been waiting for me. Cameras flashed, but I didn't blink. People shouted my name as though it were a headline, not a human being. I kept walking, one steady breath at a time. I won. But winning isn't loud. It's quiet. It's when you step outside and realize the noise doesn't belong to you anymore. In the cab ride back to Chicago, the city skyline shimmered through the glass, familiar, indifferent, alive. My reflection looked older, not from time, but from truth. Back home, I peeled off the courtroom armor, black suit, white blouse, and traded them for soft jeans and a faded blue shirt. My apartment smelled faintly of coffee and rain. I opened my laptop, stared at the final document from the court, guardianship dismissed. Assets restored. It felt heavy for a victory. I didn't print it. I didn't frame it. I placed it in a drawer and shut it gently. In the mirror, I caught my own eyes and said, "It's not about being rescued. It's about rescuing yourself." Have you ever won a battle only to discover the war was inside you all along? The next morning, dawn painted my window gold. A plain white envelope waited on the doormat, no return address. I recognized the handwriting before I opened it. Thomas. My fingers hesitated. Inside were 2 pages, written in his careful hand. Your silence was my shield. Your ignorance, my ladder. My love, a liability I sold for safety. I didn't read the rest. I didn't need to. Forgiveness isn't always a letter. Sometimes it's the decision not to open the folder. I set the pages down on the counter, picked up my jacket, and walked outside. The air carried the scent of wet earth and morning bread from the bakery down the street. I walked until the noise of the city dimmed. At the park, I sat on a bench near the water, unfolded the letter once more, then let it go. The wind caught it, lifted it like a bird that couldn't decide if it wanted to fly or drown. It landed in the pond. Ripples spread, soft and deliberate. I watched them fade until the paper sank. I didn't cry. I just breathed. Weeks passed, each one quieter than the last. The community center on the south side smelled of fresh paint and purpose. I ran my hand along the wall of the small room that would soon hold voices stronger than mine had ever been. The lease was signed. The name printed above the doorway read, "Voice reclaimed, a year of empowerment." Women began showing up one by one. Some wore heavy coats though it was warm, others carried notebooks that hadn't been opened in years. One woman, Maria, spoke softly. "I thought I was crazy," she said. "Maybe they told you were," I replied. "But you're not." They smiled. I smiled back. I traded vengeance for purpose. They stole my story, so I gave others a pen. Days blurred into a rhythm of coffee mugs, white bards, laughter, and quiet tears. Hope, I realized, doesn't shout. It hums under your breath until one day, it becomes your voice. This wasn't redemption. It was rebuilding. One evening, I stood before the group, chalk dust on my hands, heart steady. "Your voice is overdue," I said. "It belongs to you." Outside the window, dusk softened the skyline. A media van pulled into the lot, headlights dimmed. A reporter stepped out and called, "Ms. O'Connell, are you free now?" I smiled. I've always been. Freedom isn't a headline. It's a quiet sentence you repeat until you believe it. Tomorrow another whisper might stir the train, but I'll choose when the wheels roll, and when I step off.